In keeping with Easter, the nation is going through something of a renewal. We're opening up, reborn after a year of restrictions, border closures and lockdowns. But we've been way too slow, haven't we? We've seen far too many mistakes, too much panic, too many rules and regulations. We need to do better in the year ahead. I mean, Brisbane was in lockdown just last week for no good reason. Let's look at the history of lockdowns. Let's put to one side the national lockdown from March last year and the extended over-the-top lockdown and ridiculous curfew in Victoria when they lost control of hotel quarantine. Let's just consider that all that was a bit of a learning process and it enabled this country to get on top of the pandemic in a way that most of the world can only envy. But where our state governments really deserve ongoing criticism and scrutiny, and where they need to lift their game, is on their border closures and additional lockdowns over recent months. Now, you know I've been on about this all along, but all the evidence is in now. We can confirm how ridiculous, unnecessary and counterproductive the extra lockdowns have been. As you know, Brisbane had a 3-day lockdown just last week, as I mentioned, in the lead up to Easter. It ruined holiday plans for tens of thousands of people. It indirectly led to the New South Wales government taking the decision to cancel the Bluesfest event in Byron Bay, creating more misery and more economic pain. This lockdown clearly was not needed. The only additional infections were from close associates of the known cases. In other words, people who would have been isolating and isolating themselves whether there was a lockdown or not. So this was all a heavy-handed, panicked, authoritarian and uncaring decision, incredibly, from a government that imposed a similar lockdown just 2 months earlier in January, based on just one case. Now, back in February, Perth and the southern portion of Western Australia also was locked down for 5 days over just one case. Once more, travel plans and social connections were ruined for tens of thousands of people, not to mention the economic, education, health and other costs for so many people. Again, it was clear the lockdown was not needed. No infections occurred outside the known sources. In other words, outside people who would have been isolating anyway. Back in November last year, South Australia overreacted too, locking down the whole state, leading to border closures and unexpected quarantine for some unfortunate people, again based on a small cluster and a known source. This 5-day lockdown was clearly unnecessary from the start, and the state government there had to admit as much within days. Then they blamed their overreaction on incorrect information from one pizza delivery guy. I mean, really, they are that pathetic, panicked and eager to impose the iron hand of government with lockdowns. And just over a month ago, as you know, in Victoria, as if they hadn't suffered enough there already, there was another 5-day lockdown, completely superfluous. Once more, the virus was contained to known contacts. This is just terrible stuff. The damage is obvious. The failure of the lockdowns, the fact that they were not needed, was obvious when they were imposed, but the facts are now beyond dispute afterwards. The worst outbreak over this period happened in New South Wales on the northern beaches. It led to more than 150 infections. And the usual suspects, like the ABC's chief health alarmist, Dr. Norman Swan, said there was no way this could be contained without shutting down the whole of Sydney, if not New South Wales. But the New South Wales government got on top of this by locking down only the northern beaches. A tough period and a tough decision for those residents, but a far better outcome and far less damaging than hurting everyone right across Sydney or the whole state. So New South Wales has shown that competence, nerve and courage to manage these outbreaks. It's shown the other states how to contact trace, how to maintain a society while quelling a pandemic. It's beyond time for the other states to raise their standards, stop mistreating their citizens and jeopardising the well-being of the nation. Lockdowns and border closures simply must stop.